Following this session, Mr. Swarup will be signing his books in the designated book signing area. We encourage you to support his work by purchasing their books from the Universal Bookstore. I would now like to invite Mr. Swarup and Ms. Bisla on the stage to commence the session. May we have a huge round of applause for both of them, please.
Hello, and a warm welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful session with none other than Mr. Vikas Swarup. Before we begin this session, please join me in welcoming Mr. Swarup back to the literary fold after a hiatus of 11 years with a huge round of applause. I want you to imagine a typical Wednesday in your life. You wake up, brew a pot of coffee, prepare breakfast, shower and hastily get dressed for work. And you leave your house with a sense of quiet optimism. You go about the humdrum routine of your day with small victories and mundane tasks. By the end of the day, you're left with the hope that tomorrow will be at least no worse than today. But before you can unpack the day's event, a sudden jolt pulls you away from your thought. In an instant, you are thrust in a life or death situation with a stranger who has a gun to your head. What flashes through your mind in that terrifying moment? Is it the thought of your loved ones, or do your thoughts race back to the wrongs you've committed? Well, whatever the answer may be, the predominant question is, will I survive this? And how will I survive this? Well, these are the same questions that Devi, the protagonist of the girl with the 7 lives, faces when she's kidnapped and is held at gunpoint by an unknown stranger. She's forced to recount her entire life, no details left out and no secrets unturned. The stakes are brutally high. Her confession is being recorded to auction her life online to the highest bidder. Now that we've set the premise of the book, I want to know from you, Mr. Swarup, how and when did you conceive the story?
Thank you very much, Diksha, first of all, for setting the stage for our discussion, and thank you, Koshala Literature Festival, for inviting me back to Lucknow. I'm returning after many, many years, and I thought, this chicken kurta, which I had not worn for a long time, this is the place to wear it. So, as you rightly said, this book is coming out after a gap of 11 years. And it did not take me 11 years to write this novel. It took me 11 years simply because I was too busy with my day job. As most of you know, I was a professional diplomat, I was a member of the Indian Foreign Service. My last novel before this one was The Accidental Apprentice, which came out in 2013. I wrote that novel while I was posted as Consul General of India in Osaka, Kobe, Japan. I returned from Japan in 2013, and within a year or so, I became the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs.
It was such a hectic job. Every Thursday, I literally had an examination because 70 journalists would sit in front of me and they could ask me any question under the sun. And I had to prepare very thoroughly, especially for those out-of-syllabus questions, which you could not just ordinarily guess. So obviously, that left me no time to conceive of a novel, let alone writing one. And then after that, I was sent off as High Commissioner of India to Canada, which was also a very, very hectic job because I thought I would get my weekends free, but in Canada, you have a huge Indian diaspora. Ottawa alone, I think more than 50,000 Indians, and they do their stuff only on weekends, So every weekend I was either doing Holi or Diwali or Eid or Tej, Good Friday or, Kerala Day or Karnataka Day and things like that, so no time at all. Then I returned back to Delhi at the end of 2019. And 2020, at the beginning of 2020, we had the pandemic. So obviously, there was no chance of writing anything during the pandemic, even though pace of work had slowed down. But your mind was not at ease because of all the distress that was happening around you. So really, I conceived this novel, I think somewhere around that time. But I set out to write that novel only once all my transitions had happened. Meaning, I transitioned from a government servant to a private citizen. I transitioned from a government accommodation to a private accommodation. So once all those transitions were over, and this happened by the end of 2021, that's when I started really writing this novel with the utmost seriousness, sitting down every day and creating a target that I have to do at least 1,000 words per day. It took me about a year and a half to write this novel.
So we have the protagonist Devi, who is, I would say, the antithesis of Ram Mohammed Thomas from Q&A, which is Mr. Swarup's debut novel, which got adapted into Slumdog Millionaire. Now, Ram Mohammed Thomas has a very clear understanding of the rights and the wrongs. But Devi, on the other hand, is a morally ambiguous character. And yet we find the readers rooting for her at the end of every chapter. So I want to know from you, Mr. Swarup, the characterization is striking. And did you have any reservations about creating such a character?
No, actually, that was precisely my intention. To create a character which is, I would say, diametrically opposite to Ram Mohammed Thomas, but certainly differing from him in very many aspects. As you rightly said, Ram Mohammed Thomas, who was the hero of my first novel, Q&A, which became Slumdog Millionaire, has a very strong moral compass. He knows exactly what is right and what is wrong. And he does only the right things. Devi, on the other hand, is, as you rightly said, morally complex. I mean, she also has a sense of what is right and what is wrong. But she is ready to do anything to set the wrong right. In that sense, she has a strong sense of injustice, and whenever she sees injustice, she has to set the perpetrator. She has to, dole out her own sense of justice, and that could involve even murder. So she does not shy away even from murder if it satisfies her sense of justice. So the idea was, can I create a morally ambiguous character, somebody who's morally flawed in some aspects? I mean, you and I probably would not commit murder, as easily as Devi does. And yet, make her compelling enough for the reader to still root for her, to still want to follow her journey, and to still find out what happens to her next. So that was the real purpose behind creating this character of Devi. And in a way, Diksha, I would say, she represents the modern Indian woman. So the inspiration for Devi really came from the ordinary women of India, who have not really got their due, who do so much for so little.
And Devi is not your first female protagonist. We have Shabnam Saxena from Six Suspects, and we have Sapna Sinha from The Accidental Apprentice. And then we have Devi. And we see Devi in these predominantly female spaces. She is at this observation home in Delhi. Then she is amongst this all-women workforce with a racket that forges degrees. Then we find her in the healthcare sector, surrounded among a lot of other women in the profession.
Nurses.
Yes. And then, interestingly, we find her in a salon in Mumbai.
Again, all women workforce.
Exactly. And I want to know, how did you create the nuances of these female spaces, and how was it different creating these characters and viewing the world from the feminine gaze? And how is it different from the male gaze, in terms of your experience?
No, absolutely. I think the male gaze is totally different from the feminine gaze. There's no doubt about it. Women are more or less objectified. Men, unless you are Shah Rukh Khan or Hrithik Roshan, not so much, I suppose. So when I'm creating this character, it's one thing, many people say that for a male author to do a female character is very difficult because the two worlds are diametrically opposite. And in a sense they are. But I think once you get into the what should I call it, the factor of empathy, that you really try to start looking at the world from her eyes. So I really became Devi, and I said, let me look at the world from her eyes. And really, if you become that female protagonist in an observation home for girls, and you see what is happening in that observation home. Some of the reference point was what happened in Muzaffarpur, for instance. There was an observation home for girls where girls were systematically abused by the politicians who were running that particular observation home. So, in a way, it's not so difficult. If you become that person and you start looking at the world from her eyes, the world looks very different, of course. But I think you can get inside the skin of that character as well. And that's why, for me, it was important that Devi, her trajectory would go through areas where it would be a predominantly women workforce, because that's where I think women feel safer as part of their own community, so to speak. However, having said that, that does not mean that women will not go out into the other space, where which I would say neutral gender spaces, so to speak, a big corporation where men and women work shoulder to shoulder. But it was just a coincidence, I suppose, that even in the fake degree racket, all the women, all the workers are women, because as the employer says, this is a job that requires a lot of patience, and men don't have patience. Women have patience. Similarly, in the nursing sector, there are male nurses as well, but I would say women outnumber them by 10 to 1, I would imagine. There are many more female nurses than male nurses. So there also the idea was to see what is the daily life of a nurse like. We see the nurses only from outside. When you go to a hospital or give blood or something, you just see the nurse and you see her in a white uniform. But what exactly goes through a nurse's life? What are the kind of pulls and pressures she is subjected to?
So the idea was to delve deep, into those backgrounds, read up on them, and then try to sort of look at the world from their eyes. But as you rightly said, this was my third experiment of writing from a female perspective, and I have enjoyed that. When I created Shabnam Saxena in 6 Aspects, the Bollywood actress, then when I conceived of an entire novel written from a female perspective in Sapna Sinha, The Accidental Apprentice. And in Sapna Sinha, the book did fairly well. Some people liked it, some didn't like it. But I did not receive a single criticism that, Mr. Swarup, you cannot do a female character. So that gave me the confidence, I would say, and the courage that I can write another novel, with a female perspective.
Mr. Swarup, your writing is remarkably vivid and clubbed with your trademark style of chapterization. It offers easy adaptability to different mediums, which is what we've seen with Q&A, which got adapted in multiple Oscar-winning movie by Danny Boyle, Slumdog Millionaire. Then we have 6 Suspects, which is picked up by Tigmanshu Dhulia, and it's a series. It's a 9-part series on Disney Plus Hotstar, and goes by the name of The Great Indian Murder. And then we see a similar writing style here with The Girl with 7 Lives. And now I want to know, sir, that now you've seen your work being adapted to all of these different mediums. Has it influenced your writing now in any way?
Yeah, so many people ask me that now that your first book became a film, your second book became a web series, do you now write with one eye, hoping that it will be adapted into either a web series or a film? And my answer is no. Look, I'll be lying if I said I wouldn't want it to be adapted. But having said that, it does not mean that when I'm writing, then I'm writing from that perspective. Isme thoda masala dal dete hain, it will make a good. Because then what will happen is your book will become so dumbed down. It will not be a good book, and if it's not a good book, it will definitely not be a good web series or a good film also. So I write a novel, and when I'm writing a novel, I have to be true to a novelist's intentions of creating the character arc that my character will take. Then at the end of the day, if somebody finds that my writing is vivid enough, the characters are brilliant, are vivid enough for them to translate onto celluloid, then that's their lookup. But I do not write from a point of view that this will tomorrow become a film, so let's put in elements that will make it a better film. Because if I want to do that, then I should write screenplays, not novels. Like in my second book, 6 Suspects, Q&A had already been optioned for a film when I was writing 6 Suspects. I wouldn't have written a murder mystery if I wanted the film transition, because the most difficult thing to film is a murder mystery. Because in a book you can hide the murder, but in a film, how do you hide the murder? It's very difficult.
I have a follow-up question to that. So, how much of creative liberty is lost or retained by the author when it comes to adaptations? And also the relationship between author and authority.
Author and authority?
It's a complex relationship, I would assume, because while you may have control over the narrative and the plot and the characters, but once the medium changes,
yes,
and the external
absolutely.
influences definitely shape how the story will be perceived by the audience.
No, absolutely. So I always say this, that I prefer to write novels rather than screenplays, because a novelist has much more creative liberty and freedom. In the sense, you are creating a world in your head, all the characters are invented by you, even the laws of physics need not apply if you don't want them to. If you're writing magical realism, for instance, laws of physics also need not apply. That kind of freedom and liberty you do not have as a screenplay writer. For the simple reason, as you said, the authority is not one. The authority is the financer, the producer, the executive producers, the director. Everybody has an input. So screenplay writing becomes writing by committee. There are 10 people who are giving input. Some says, इसमें थोड़ा violence डाल दीजिए, इसमें romance angle को थोड़ा बढ़ा दीजिए. So basically, what happens is your own creative vision. Some I wouldn't say get lost, but definitely gets diluted. Just look at any film and look at, I'm not talking about Bollywood, look at Hollywood, look at any screenplay, and you'll have at least 6 or 7 people credited for the screenplay. Which means the original screenplay writer wrote something, then they gave it out to a second screenplay writer who added something, then a third, then a fourth, and finally the director added his own 2 pennies worth. So this is what happens, that your own creative vision is definitely going to get diluted because the stakes are much higher in a film. When you are writing a book and somebody publishes your book and the book bombs, how much does the publisher lose? Maybe 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs. But if a film bombs, you lose 50 lakhs, 1 crore, 10 crores, 50, 100 crores, so the stakes are much higher. And that is why I suppose, the creative liberty that the screenplay writer has is more limited.
The most valuable thing in the world is not money, it's attention. That's the very first line of the book. And building on that, I want to know from you, Mr. Swarup, that now with so many mediums vying for people's attention, the pattern of content consumption has drastically shifted. And do you think that now with the diminishing attention spans of the audience, that people are more inclined towards watching content instead of actually physically picking up a book and reading it?
I think 2 or 3 transitions have happened. First of all, at one time, because the culture was of the middleman, if you wanted to publish a book, you had to go to a publisher and an agent. If you wanted to become a musician, you had to go to the music agent or a recording company. Those filters are gone now. You can directly upload your stuff on YouTube, you can directly publish your book on Amazon, you can directly start a blog, and you can create reels on Instagram. So what has happened is, earlier we were downloaders or consumers. Now we all want to become creators. And that's why, when I was growing up, we never heard of a term called influencer. But I think the fastest growing occupation in the world right now is influencer. So, and it's directly a sign of this attention economy. And that's why, in a way, it was a wink at the mores of our time. We all thought that the information revolution is a great thing, and everybody now has information at their fingertips, thanks to Google, etc. And now the problem is we have too much information. And now the thing in short supply is attention. Because there are so many things competing for your attention, the most valuable thing has become attention. And all the algorithms are basically meant to capture your attention. Whether it is TikTok, or whether it is Twitter, or whether it is Instagram. They are all designed to capture your attention. And that's why, the easiest way to capture your attention these days is, if you want your attention to capture somebody's attention, either lose your temper or your clothes.
Well, Mr. Swarup, despite all of that, you managed to capture your reader's attention because the book is absolutely unputdownable. And a lot of it also has to do with the fact that your writing is heavily influenced by cinema. And we see these super hit tropes from the golden era of Bollywood making their way into your universe of social thrillers. We have the villain who rises from the dead. We have families being reunited by some tattoos. We have a loyal dog. So all of these tropes have made their way into the novel in a way that it evokes familiarity. But also in the process, when we're following Devi from Delhi to Punjab to Kerala, then Goa and Mumbai, we come across a lot of archetypal characters. We have the godman, the banker, the racketeer. So I want to know that these people also happen to mirror a lot of people from this plane of existence. Was that characterization intentional?
Yes, I think, subconsciously probably a lot of Bollywood filters into my writing because, I grew up on the golden era of Bollywood, films like Lavaris and Sholay and Muqaddar Ka Sikandar, Amitabh Bachchan's Diwar, Trishul, all those films. And yes, you see, one reason why some people say that, some of your characters resemble Bollywood is because I create characters which are slightly larger than that. That is the thing. The leitmotif of my novels is always ordinary people thrust into extraordinary situations. But in those extraordinary situations, they have to do extraordinary things. And that's why they become, I would say, larger than life, so to speak. But having said that, I do not want to create that typical Bollywood character, the typical villain or the typical heroine or the typical hero. The idea is to always nuance it so that they have some familiar elements, but they can also surprise you. That is the and Devi, I think, is that type of a person. She is definitely not your typical Hindi film heroine who's all goody good. I mean, she has shades of grey.
And she also, in a way, betrays her age, I would say. Devi has this maturity about her, and she does not hesitate to transgress the boundaries of justice, transgress her age, and that works great for the plot. Because when you are when you're suspended in disbelief and you made the familiar threatening by virtue of the genre, it actually creates the formula for, again, if I may, a bestseller.
Yeah, I would say, Devi's worldview is formed very early. She became an orphan at the age of 8. She's just 8 years old. She's living in a slum on the outskirts of Delhi. She has lost her parents, she has lost her mother, she has lost her father, she has lost her brother. So she's an orphan. And that is, her formative influences, all these events that have happened, create in her this belief, these 3 things that she believes in. Number 1, there is no God. Number 2, everything is chance. And number 3, take your chances when you get there. So, it's this go-getter attitude that, if there is an opportunity, I have to grab this opportunity before it goes away. I think that is really what defines, her actions for the rest of the novel. She declares her philosophy, I think, in the first 2 or 3 pages of the novel. There is no God, everything is chance, and take your chances. And that's why I suppose, this aspirational, in a way she represents aspirational India, because aspirational India is also like that. I don't say that they don't believe in God, probably they do, but they definitely believe in everything is chance and take your chances when you get it.
That's wonderful. And Devi, Deepa, thus meet Deepthi, Diana, Dolly. The protagonist of The Girl with the Sudden Life goes by many names. Is there a deeper significance behind the title also? Like, does it allude to in any way the reincarnation that we find in Hinduism? Or when we see her life, how she is reinventing herself from scratch? She reaches certain heights, and then again, by some reversal of fortune, she has to start all over again.
In a way, it's snakes and ladders, that every time you climb some things, a snake comes and lassos you and you come right back down. I wouldn't call it reincarnation, because reincarnation in a sense involves death and you are reincarnated in a new life. But yes, the word I would use is reinvention. She has to reinvent herself almost every 3 years, for the simple reason that the past has caught up with her, and the police are after her, and she cannot even acknowledge her previous identity. So she changes geography, as you rightly said. Her journey takes her from Delhi to Punjab, to Kerala, to Goa, to Mumbai. So that's one. And number 2, she has to adopt all these different identities, and sometimes these identities are not adopted by her; they are given to her. Like at the observation home, the owner of the observation home, because somebody did not put a proper, dandi of the P, it became a B, and instead of Deepa, she became Diba, which is a Muslim name. And the chairman of the observation home thinks that she's a Muslim, and she's brought Idi, the nice food that you have on Bakruli, and she says, okay, if that's the only way I can get hold of this food, I have no hesitation in saying that I'm a Muslim. So she accepts that identity, so to speak. But yes, in a way, I also wanted to allude to how fluid our identities have become in the digital age now. Because now, thanks to the internet and the anonymity of the internet, we all can become whatever we want. And look at the avatars that people are now having, in terms of their Insta profile or whatever. You can become whoever you want to become.
Also, the resolution, the denouement in the novel. I've seen how, in a very trademark style, you tie all the loose threads, and ultimately, despite all the crests and troughs the protagonists go through, the novel will have a resolution that will provide catharsis. Is that a conscious pattern that you follow in your books?
Yes. You see, writers these days, if you pick up a book by a modern writer, especially those very literary writers, there is no resolution. They don't believe in resolution. They're just capturing a moment in time. 2 people are talking, there's a train journey, the train journey ends, the 2 people go their separate ways, and the novel ends there. And leaving you puzzling what happened to them. Maybe that's the intention, that you should still think about what happened. I don't believe in that. I believe that if you have picked up my book, if you have spent 499 rupees and spent 3 or 4 days or 7 days reading my novel, then there has to be a payoff at the end. I cannot leave you puzzling into the night, So I believe in resolution very, very strongly, and that's why all 4 of my novels, when I start writing them, I start with the ending. Because there is a payoff at the end, which means it's something surprising. The idea is to surprise you, if not shock you. To surprise you definitely, and that surprise has to be embedded very carefully. Because if I just write stream of consciousness and say, you know, at the end I'll give a surprise, it will not happen, because unless you embed that surprise very, very artfully, the reader will be able to guess it in 30 seconds.
Now that we've come to the ending, can we expect another book anytime soon?
Yes, certainly. I can assure you it will not take 11 years. I am a retired Indian Foreign Service officer now. I have much more time at my disposal. So early next year I'll start conceptualizing my next book. I was still debating between fiction and non-fiction because, you know, having spent 35 years as a career diplomat, a lot of publishers are after me to also do a book on geopolitics, on India-Canada, for instance, you know, which has become a very, very hot topic now, thanks to what's been happening. So I was also pulled in that direction, but I still feel that my real forte is fiction. And in non-fiction, as I said, you don't have that freedom because you are bound by the facts. Unless, of course, you write a fact-free thing and call it non-fiction, and, you know, which is many memoirs these days are actually fiction dressed up as non-fiction. No, if I were to write a non-fiction, I have to be adhering to the facts. Fiction allows you the luxury of creating a fact-free world where you invent the facts.
Thank you so much, Mr. Swarup, for this very well-rounded conversation. Should we open it up to the audience?
Absolutely, I think, you know, again, the audience who have invested their time into coming and listening to us, they also must have a payoff at the end, in case anybody wants to ask any questions.
Do we have any questions?
So I'm going to cheat and ask you 2 questions.
Okay.
So I'm a bureaucrat myself, and I have writing ambitions. You answered this question partially actually, but still I would like to know more. How did you plan it out? How did you plan out writing? Because it's been practically a parallel career for you. So how did you plan it out? And the second thing that I would like to ask is that a lot of your protagonists come from what I would call not from a good background, and put it in quotes. How do you relate to them? How do you think of them, and how do you research them?
Both are excellent questions. So let's start with your second question first. First of all, I would contest that all my characters, you know, come from the underprivileged class. No. In the first book, yes, Slumdog Millionaire, the character was belonging to the underclass, starting off life from a slum. But second book, 6 suspects, 6 different people. There was a Bollywood actress, there is a mobile phone thief, there is a, you know, high-profile ex-bureaucrat, there is a politician, there is a tribal from the Andaman Islands, and there is a Larry Page from Waco, Texas. So 6 different people from 6 different strata of society. The idea was to create a polyphonic narrative where you look at India through 6 different eyes. So there, it's definitely not an underclass tale. It's a tale where all the classes meld together, so to speak. Then in the third book, The Accidental Apprentice, it is the world of the middle class. It is definitely not the world of the underclass. She's a middle class girl, Sapna Sinha. And that's why in the new book, it's a reversal back to the underclass. So I tend to vary the social classes in my novel. It's not that I'm just an underclass writer, all my books are about the underclass. The idea is to vary it. And because I touched the world of the middle class in the previous novel, I thought reverting back to the world of Slumdog Millionaire would be good. Now the question you ask is, how do you put yourself in those shoes? So I answered to Diksha earlier, when you look at from the female gaze and the female perspective, the quality of empathy. Because look, emotions are the same for whether you are a man or woman, whether you are a Neanderthal or Aristotle or Shakespeare or 21st century. The emotions of humans have not changed. Anger, lust, avarice, jealousy, passion, all these have remained the same. You just have to take something out of the equation and put something into the equation to look at their lives. Take money out of the equation, put money into the equation, and see how the life changes. But the emotions don't change. You know, so from that point of view, it gives you the confidence that look, at the end of the day, whether it's a man or a woman, jealousy is jealousy. You know, the jealousy that you feel is the same jealousy that a female would also feel. Yes, the world looks different, but the emotions remain the same. So that's the thing. The second thing is research. That is very, very important. And when I wrote my first book, Q&A, I wrote about Dharavi. And I had never visited Dharavi. Of course, all of us have been to slums. No one can say that they have never seen a slum in India. The rich and the poor, nobody is an island here. But I had not visited Dharavi, so I read 6 books on Dharavi, Kalpana Sharma's book and 4 or 5 other books, just to get a sense of what Dharavi was all about. And then I wrote from that perspective. So research is very, very important, because only research can help you create an authentic backdrop, for things and situations that you yourself are not aware of. So that's your second question. What was your first question again? Yes, as you as a bureaucrat yourself. So for me, the important thing was compartmentalization. For me, the work always came first, and that's why it took me 11 years to write this novel. Unlike some of my contemporaries who produce a new work almost every year, for me, the work always came first. I could not be moonlighting as a writer, and leaving my official duties, putting them to the side. And that's why I would always compartmentalize. I call myself a weekend writer. Monday to Friday, I would be, hard at work, going to office, doing whatever stuff I need to do. But Saturday and Sunday, if office is not intruding on weekends, then you can think of writing. And that's how I wrote my first 3 novels. Q&A, 6 Suspects and The Accidental Princess. Q&A was written when I was posted in London. 6 Suspects was written when I was posted in South Africa. The Accidental Apprentice when I was posted in Japan. And it was really those stolen moments that you get on weekends that I was able to write this. So the compartmentalization is important. That when you are a writer, then you have compartmentalized the other part. There are no looming deadlines, and you are concentrating on, because you see, to write, you need to have that arc. That arc is very important, because I meet so many young writers who say, I started a novel but I couldn't finish it. Because you could not conceive of that full arc. A novel, that's the difference between a novel and a short story. A short story has a point, but a novel has a plot. And in the plot, there has to be an evolution. Your character is not at the end of the novel what the character was at the beginning of the novel. And you have to plot that entire arc in your head, or on your, or on your computer or wherever. And once that entire arc is in your head, then you have to find the time and the space to write down, how that arc will manifest itself, in your work actually. So discipline is very, very important. You have to set yourself a target. Okay, 1,000 words at least per day. That's the only way to finish a novel.
Do we have any more questions?
Good evening, sir. Myself, Adarsh Tiwari. I'm a short filmmaker and screenplay writer and author part-time. So, sir, while writing novel, somehow I get, an element of film and screenwriting. So how do I differentiate while writing novel and screen? Because as a filmmaker, as a script writer, it somehow comes in that while writing novel. So that is a quite disturbing part for me while writing a novel. How can I
I cannot answer really, Adarsh, because I'm not a screenplay writer, but you are. So it's probably very natural that those 3 roles will somehow or the other intrude. When you're doing one, because you cannot compartmentalize yourself, seal yourself off completely. That okay, there's been no diffusion of my screenplay avatar into my writer's avatar. It's not possible. And some of the diffusion may not be bad also. I mean, it's not to say if a visual element creeps into your novel, it's not a bad thing. I write from a very visual perspective, so it's not. The only thing you have to guard against is that, if the novel starts becoming totally like a screenplay or very visual, then the integrity of that novel sometimes can be lost.
That's what I meant.
So there, I think just read Premchand, read Khushwant Singh, and then the earthiness of their writing, where when Premchand was writing, I mean, Bollywood I suppose had started, but he had no intention of it ever becoming. He really wrote from the perspective of the ordinary people, some Dalua here, Halwa there, some ordinary people and their lives. So just think of Premchand, just think of Khushwant Singh, that how are they visualizing it, what is the character arc that they would have thought of. And then I think you will get back right on track.
Thank you so much.
Because otherwise it's very easy for you to get distracted that my screenplay avatar is now intruding into my writer's avatar.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
I
I will.
Hi, sir. How do you think Indian literature shapes the global perception of the country? Your books often balance entertainment and social commentary. So, do you strive to make it palatable for the audience? And also, when a book goes global or when it gets adapted, so how do you think the perception of the Indian society changes hands then?
Very interesting question. So, see, many people, Q&A, for instance, now has not been translated into 47 languages. The latest being Uzbek. Can you imagine? So many people ask me that when you are writing a novel, then are you thinking about your global readership? That tomorrow this will go into Hungarian and Bulgarian and Uzbek and Turkish and Lithuanian and French and Portuguese. And I think you can't do that. Because the moment you start thinking, oh, I'm using this muhabara, this proverb, this will not be able to be understood by the person in France. What will happen is you will dumb down your novel to such an extent that it will appeal only to the least common denominator, which means that your novel will be bleached of all particularity. It will become a completely anodyne novel which nobody would be interested in. I have said this in many of my interviews. There is no such thing as a global novel. It is always a local novel, rooted in the local reality, which goes global because the themes that it evokes are universal. The theme of Q&A was the underdog winning. Now, underdog winning is the same whether it's in Argentina or whether it's in India. Similarly, Davy's story, it's of resilience and redemption, that these themes are universal. So, you have, from a very, very local perspective, I always say I write as an Indian for Indians. And that is why when a Chinese reader picks up my book, they are trying to get a perspective as to what is India. What is, when I'm picking up a book by a Korean writer, I'm also trying to get a, maybe I love that writer's style, but I'm also trying to get a sense of, what is Korea all about? What is their society? How, what are the norms and customs of that society? And probably I get some inkling by reading this Korean writer's works. So, when you write from a very particular local context, so that sense of authenticity, if Indians don't relate to your novel, how will the rest of the world relate to you? If Indians have rejected saying this is bakwas, he's writing about Lucknow and he's saying Imam Bada is in Agra, and this is nonsense. So that is very, very important. But having said that, how it shapes perceptions of India? Yes, now some people will say that as a diplomat you should have written about the shining India, the India of the call centers, and India of the skyscrapers, etc. But that was never, then I would write a tourist brochure. Then my job should be, I write a tourist brochure on India or a tourist brochure on Delhi, these are the places to visit. When I'm writing a novel, I have to be true to the characters I am creating. And if my character belongs to the underclass, then he cannot be studying at La Martiniere and graduating from Lucknow University in Chapter 4. His life has to follow the bars, the chops of India. But that does not mean that I'm defensive about what I'm writing, that, oh my God, I'm presenting India in a negative light. No, I'm telling the Indian reality, but the ending is always an optimistic one, where, as I said, this is about aspirational India, where it does not matter where you are coming from, what matters is where you are going to. That even somebody who's totally disadvantaged was never given the kind of chances in life that you and I have got. Even that person can overcome the odds and emerge as the winner. So whether it is Sapna Sinha in The Accidental Apprentice, whether it is Ram Mohammed Thomas in Q&A, the idea is to show that the underclass also is not bound by their destiny, that they were born into a slum, that they will die as slum. That they can make their better life for themselves. And yes, I show crime and corruption, but I also show accountability. That's the essence of a democracy. A democracy does not mean that there is no crime, there is no corruption. The only difference between a democracy and autocracy is, in the autocracy, that crime and corruption will go unpunished if it is being done by the top people. In a democracy, if you are found out, you will get punished. As simple as that.
I have a follow-up question of my own. So, as a writer, you have certain control over your characters and the narrative you're presenting. But what happens when the characters move away from you? As we've seen in Slumdog Millionaire, and right from the name of the protagonist to certain scenes that were inserted later, the story did appeal to, I would say, a widely Western sensibility. It did well, but when it came to India, there was certain controversy surrounding the reception of the movie.
Yes, of the movie, not of the book. First of all, the name of the movie itself was Slumdog Millionaire. My book was called Q&A. So the slums became a very focal part of the movie. In my book, the slums was just a backdrop, in the first few chapters of Ram Mohammed Thomas living. The rest of the book really moves from Delhi to Agra to Mumbai, places like that. So I think that was a big difference between the book and the film. And then of course there was a famous shit scene in the film, which again is not there in the book at all. And many people call the film poverty porn. That this is a film that objectifies poverty. I don't believe in that. I don't think there's anything called poverty porn. Nobody wants to see poverty, or they love to see poverty. I think who would want to go to a movie to say, hey, let's see poor people today? I think that's a ridiculous idea. And in any case, even a film about poverty will not work unless it's a compelling story. Whether it is Pather Panchali or whatever. That is also said about the underclass, the really disadvantaged people. But because it's such a compelling human story, that's why it did well. So at the end of the day, what is important is the story. If the story is an authentic one, if the story is a gripping one, it does not matter whether you set it in the call center or whether you set it in a job.
Wonderful. Any more questions?
Yeah. Myself, Shakhendu, I am from Noida, sir. And having read few of your books, I can say this with a lot of humility that I am privileged by your presence in the way you have narrated. Though I joined the session quite late. And I have always seen you as a beacon of hope who has been blending his stories with realism and motivation. Having said that, how do you foresee, because you see the way news and views are being presented in a fictional manner. So, how do you see the potential and hope for the future writers who are already actually writing the fiction?
Yes. So I think, a lot of new elements have been now introduced into the writing matrix. The biggest change I think that is going to come is the advent of AI, artificial intelligence. Already if you look at ChatGPT, it can produce a perfectly good screenplay or a novel. Already it has the capability. I won't say that novel will win the Booker Prize or the Pulitzer Prize, not yet, but give it another 5 years. Sam Altman just said that artificial general intelligence, which is the holy grail of AI, is coming as early as 2025, that is next year. Ray Kurzweil said it's coming by 2029. Sam Altman is saying it's coming by 2025. And once that happens, then I think all bets are off. Because then you will have that superhuman computer which has read every novel ever written, which has read every book ever written, which has read every screenplay ever written. And it knows what are the elements that work. So far nobody has been able to crack the hit code. What makes a hit film or a hit book. Because if people had cracked it, every book by the publisher would be a super hit film or a super hit book. Nobody has cracked it. But ChatGPT could crack it. AI could crack it because it would have read everything and it would have synthesized what are the elements common to those which have become bestsellers, for instance. So I think artificial intelligence is going to be the biggest game changer. And also, as you rightly said, this fictitious news, fake news, the fake news factory is going to be absolutely energized by the advent of AI. Already AI has the capability of creating a video which will look exactly like you, speaking exactly like you in your voice, but saying things which you have never said. So because of that, the potential for mischief is so great now, especially in terms of election interference, especially in terms of politics, and especially in terms of even personal lives. A lady journalist that you don't like, suddenly you can put out a video about her, doing things which she has never done before. So my worry is that now we need the fact-checking even more. Already fact-checking was necessary, but now I think we need it even more. And people need to realize that, just don't accept any WhatsApp forward that just comes to you. The biggest danger in the world today is not from terrorists. It's from the graduates from the University of WhatsApp. Because these are the people who accept any nonsense that comes to them and immediately forward it to 20 other people. And before you know it, a narrative has formed, ये सही होगा, ये WhatsApp पे आया था तो सही होगा. WhatsApp पे आया तो सही नहीं होगा. People have been lynched in our country, you know that. Rumors circulated that, a gang of kidnappers, child kidnappers, is roaming around in a black car. Next black car was stopped, people inside were taken out and they were lynched to death. Because of this fake rumor that anybody traveling in a black car is a child kidnapper. So we have to be really on our guard. I mean, WhatsApp had to stop more than 5 forwards after that. We are the only country in the world where WhatsApp had to take that particular action. So this tells you that we have to be very, very vigilant. We have to be very, very alert as to what is fake news and what is real news and what is the boundary between this. It's a very troubling time now for us. I have no easy answers.
Any other questions?
I thought we've exhausted our time already.
Time, you're right. Should we wrap it up then? Thank you so much, Mr. Swarup, for the very insightful session, and it was thoroughly entertaining. And thank you all of you for being such a lovely audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diksha, for bringing the best part of it.
That was an amazing session. I would like to invite Mr. Amitav Singh again to felicitate both of them. Maybe have a huge round of applause for all of them. You can find Mr. Swarup's book at the Universal Bookstore, and he will also be available for book signing in the designated area.